Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something really profound, an ancient answer to a question that feels very, very modern.
Think about it. How does a performance, on a stage or on your screen, how does it actually reach out and stir up real, powerful emotions inside you? How can something that's totally made up make you feel genuine joy, or sorrow, or even fear?
Well, it turns out the answer might come from this ancient, incredible masterwork on the performing arts. We're talking written somewhere between 200 BCE and 200 CE. It's called the Natya Shastra. And it gives us this amazingly sophisticated way to think about that connection, a system we now call the Rasa theory.
Okay, so to really unpack all of this, here is the roadmap we're going to follow. First up, we'll tackle the core concepts of the theory. Then we'll get into the performer's recipe, it's like alchemy really, for creating emotion. After that, we'll look at how the audience tastes the performance before we break down the 8 main emotional flavors. And to wrap it all up, we'll see how it all clicks together in this really fascinating hierarchy of feeling.
All right, first things first. We've got to lay the groundwork for this whole system. And it really all boils down to the relationship between 2 key ideas, Rasa and Bhava.
So the big idea here is rasa, and the literal translation is just fantastic. It means juice, taste, or flavor. And honestly, that's the perfect way to think about it. See, rasa isn't the raw emotion itself, like the anger you feel when you're stuck in traffic. No, it's the refined, artistic flavor of that emotion, something that an artist has carefully prepared for an audience to savor. It's an elevated, sublime kind of experience.
Okay, so if rasa is the final, cooked dish, what's the main ingredient? Well, that would be what's called the sthaya bhava, or dominant state. Now, don't get too hung up on the pronunciation of these Sanskrit words, okay? What really matters is the beautiful concept. These are the raw, fundamental psychological states that are just part of being human. Things like love, sorrow, anger, fear. This is the stuff the artist has to work with.
And right here is where we get to a really, really important distinction. The sthaya bhava, that's the cause. It's the raw ingredient that exists inside a person. The rasa, on the other hand, is the effect. It's the finished, beautifully presented dish that comes out of the performance. The Natya Shastra is super clear about this. The aesthetic sentiments, the rasas, they come from the raw states, not the other way around. It's a one-way street, a transformation.
Okay, so how in the world does a performer pull this off? How do they take something so personal, a private emotion, and basically turn it into this public, artistic experience, a rasa that a whole room full of people can share? It really is like a kind of emotional alchemy, isn't it?
Well, the Natya Shastra actually gives us a surprisingly specific recipe. It says you create rasa by taking that dominant state and mixing it with 3 key things. First, you have the determinants. These are the causes of the emotion, so the plot, the characters, the setting. Then you have the consequence, which are the visible physical signs of the emotion. A furrowed brow, a tear in the eye, a clenched fist. And finally, you sprinkle in the transitory states, all those little fleeting emotions that dance around the main one, like a flash of anxiety or a moment of joy.
So, to actually cook up this complex recipe, the performer has a toolkit with 4 distinct tools. And this whole art of expression, of getting the meaning and the feeling across to the audience, has a name: Abhinaya.
And what's so brilliant about this is how holistic it is. The performer's toolkit isn't just the obvious stuff, right? It's not just their body movements, that's angika, or their voice, vachika. It also includes the aharya, which is everything visual, from the costumes to the makeup. But maybe the most profound one is sattvika. This is the actor's inner emotional state made visible. We're talking about things like trembling, sweating, a crack in the voice, those involuntary signs that show they are genuinely connected to the feeling.
Okay, we've spent a lot of time on the performer's side, so let's flip things around and look at the other side of the equation, the audience, because without them, the Rasa theory just doesn't work. So how does all this actually land with the people watching? Yeah, the text keeps coming back to this really powerful food analogy. It says the audience doesn't just watch what's happening, they actively taste the emotions that are being served up. It's just like a chef mixing spices to create a complex flavor. The performer is mixing all those elements we talked about to create an emotional flavor, a rasa, that the audience can then savor and enjoy.
And this is such a crucial point. The audience isn't just a passive sponge soaking it all up. The text calls them cultured people or connoisseurs. They have to be open and ready to actively participate in the process, to really taste with their heart what's being shown. It's a two-way street, you know. The performer offers the flavor, but the audience has to have the palate to appreciate it. And here's why that matters. It gives real power to the audience. Art isn't just something that happens at you. It's an experience you help create.
Okay, so we've got the how of this whole emotional alchemy thing down. Now let's look at the what. What are the specific emotional flavors that a performance can actually create? Well, the Natya Shastra lays out 8 primary rasas.
And here you can see the whole system laid out so perfectly. Each aesthetic sentiment, each rasa, is tied directly to its raw emotional ingredient, its bhava. So for instance, the erotic rasa, that comes from the dominant state of love. The furious rasa, that's born from anger. The pathetic rasa from sorrow. And what's amazing is that for each one, the text gives you specific triggers, the determinants that a performer can use. Want to create a comic flavor? Try using some ridiculous costumes or showing greed. Looking to create the terrible? Use some scary noises or show some ghosts. It's basically a complete playbook for telling stories that make people feel things.
But wait, there's one more layer, and this is where it gets really deep. The theory shows that these 8 emotional flavors aren't just a random list. Nope, they're part of a deeply interconnected system, a kind of emotional logic. How cool is that? The idea that there's a logic to how emotions connect in stories?
So, the Natya Shastra says that 4 of these sentiments are the originals, and the other 4 actually grow out of them in this really interesting cause and effect way. For example, it says that imitating the erotic is what gives us the comic. Just think about any parody of a love story. The result of the furious is the pathetic. You know, after a huge angry battle, what's left is often sorrow and loss. The result of the heroic is the marvelous. When someone does something incredibly brave, it can fill us with awe and wonder. And finally, something that's terrible, like seeing a ghost, often leads to the odious, a feeling of disgust.
This just shows you how incredibly deep this theory is. It's not just the list, right? It's a map that shows how feelings are related to each other inside a story. And the big takeaway here is that this gives us a complete logical framework for both understanding why a story makes us feel a certain way and for crafting that emotional journey from the get-go. It's a tool for the creator and a new lens for the audience.
So what the Rasa theory really gives us is a whole new way to experience every story. It tells us that the feelings we get from a movie or a book aren't just random accidents. They're carefully crafted flavors made just for us to taste. So here's a challenge. The next time you're really moved by a performance, try asking yourself not just, what am I feeling, but what emotional flavor is the artist serving me right now? Can you taste the difference between, say, the raw sorrow of loss and the more complex, bittersweet taste of separation? Because understanding this ancient idea might just make you appreciate that incredible alchemical bond between a storyteller and an audience that's been around for thousands of years.